December 7, 1941. A day that lives in infamy. The surprise attack on Pearl Harbor plunged the United States into World War II, but in the chaos and fear that followed, another, darker chapter of American history began to unfold, one that would challenge the very ideals the nation claimed to fight for. This is the story of how fear turned into policy, how neighbors turned on neighbors, and how over 120,000 people, most of them American citizens, were stripped of their rights and freedoms. In the immediate aftermath of Pearl Harbor, a wave of anti-Japanese sentiment swept across the nation, particularly on the West Coast. Fear, fueled by wartime propaganda and long-standing racial prejudice, painted every person of Japanese descent as a potential spy or saboteur. Newspapers ran sensational headlines, politicians called for drastic action, and the public mood grew increasingly hostile. It didn't matter if you were Issei, first-generation immigrants who were legally barred from becoming citizens, or Nisei, their American-born children who were citizens by birthright. In the eyes of a panicked nation, your face was your crime. This widespread hysteria reached the highest levels of government. On February 19, 1942, just over 2 months after Pearl Harbor, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066. This order gave the military broad authority to designate military areas and to exclude any or all persons from them. While the order never mentioned Japanese Americans by name, it was clear who the target was. It was a decision that would set a devastating precedent, authorizing the forced removal and incarceration of an entire ethnic group based on nothing more than their ancestry. The implementation was swift and brutal. Posters appeared in communities up and down the West Coast, ordering all people of Japanese ancestry to report to designated assembly centers. Families were given just days, sometimes only hours, to sell their homes, their businesses, their farms, everything they had spent a lifetime building. They were told to pack only what they could carry. Imagine having to abandon your life's work for a fraction of its value, or simply leave it all behind. Imagine trying to explain to your children why they had to leave their home, their school, and their friends, all because of where their grandparents were born. From these temporary assembly centers, often located at racetracks or fairgrounds where families were housed in horse stalls, they were herded onto trains with blacked-out windows. They didn't know where they were going or for how long. Their destination turned out to be 10 remote, desolate relocation centers, a euphemism for what they truly were, concentration camps. These camps were scattered across the country in some of its harshest environments, from the deserts of Arizona and California to the swamplands of Arkansas and the high plains of Wyoming. Life inside these camps was a constant struggle for survival and dignity. Barbed wire fences and armed guards surrounded the perimeters, a constant reminder that these were prisons, not communities. Families were crammed into single-room barracks, crude wooden structures covered in tar paper that did little to protect them from the scorching summer heat or the freezing winter cold. Dust storms were a constant plague, seeping through the cracks in the walls and covering everything in a fine layer of grit. Privacy was non-existent. People ate in communal mess halls, used latrine blocks, and showered in open stalls. Yet, in the face of this profound injustice, the incarcerated Japanese Americans demonstrated incredible resilience. They established schools for their children, planted gardens to supplement the meager rations, and formed their own camp governments. They published newspapers, organized sports leagues, and created art, music, and poetry to maintain their culture and their humanity. They tried to create a semblance of normal life in the most abnormal of circumstances. Perhaps the most heart-wrenching irony of this entire episode was the test of patriotism. While their families were locked behind barbed wire, thousands of young Nisei men were asked to prove their loyalty to the United States. They were presented with a controversial loyalty questionnaire, which included 2 particularly difficult questions. One asked if they were willing to serve in the U.S. Armed Forces. The other asked them to forswear any allegiance to the Emperor of Japan. For the Nisei, who were American citizens, this second question was insulting, implying they had a pre-existing allegiance to a foreign leader. Over 33,000 Japanese Americans served in the U.S. military during World War II, fighting for the very country that had imprisoned their families. The 100th Infantry Battalion and the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, composed almost entirely of Nisei soldiers, became the most decorated unit of its size and length of service in American military history. They fought with unparalleled bravery in Europe, earning thousands of medals and suffering immense casualties, all while their parents, siblings, and loved ones remained incarcerated back home. After the war ended and the camps were finally closed in 1946, the return to life outside the wire was not easy. People returned to find their homes and businesses gone, their possessions looted. They faced continued prejudice and struggled to rebuild their lives from scratch, carrying the deep emotional and psychological scars of their wrongful imprisonment. For decades, many in the community remained silent about their experience, a period they called gaman, a Japanese term for enduring the seemingly unbearable with patience and dignity. It wasn't until years later that the nation began to confront this dark chapter. In the 1980s, a congressional commission concluded that the internment was not a military necessity, but was a grave injustice fueled by race prejudice, war hysteria, and a failure of political leadership. In 1988, President Ronald Reagan signed the Civil Liberties Act, issuing a formal apology from the U.S. government and providing a symbolic payment of $20,000 to each surviving internee. It was a long overdue acknowledgement of the wrong that had been done. The story of the Japanese-American internment is more than just a historical event. It's a powerful and enduring lesson about the fragility of freedom. It shows how easily fear can erode civil liberties and how constitutional rights can be ignored in times of crisis. It reminds us that citizenship is not a guarantee of protection and that we must remain vigilant against prejudice and injustice in all its forms. The words inscribed on the National Japanese-American Memorial in Washington, D.C. serve as a stark warning for all future generations. May the lessons learned here be a sober reminder of what we must be vigilant against in times of crisis. Thank you for watching. If you found this story important, please like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into history.